Gravity Falls is simply the best series Disney has ever made. And no, it doesn't need a third season. So in this video, let's take a look at why it's the best Disney series. Let's start by saying that its characters are incredibly interesting. On one hand, we have Dipper, who is very logical, curious, and smart. He's the one who introduced us to all the mysteries of Gravity Falls by finding journal number 3 in the first episode. On the other hand, we have Mabel, a very sweet, distracted, and charismatic girl. But despite this, many found her to be a very annoying character, because being somewhat reckless, she always ends up putting others in danger. In this first episode, we're introduced to other characters, 3 of whom are very important to the plot. The first one is Uncle Stan, the owner of the Mystery Shack, where Dipper and Mabel end up living. Stan is very stingy, greedy, indifferent, and cynical man. His actions in this episode make us think that he doesn't care at all if Dipper and Mabel die. Basically, this first season tells us what Gravity Falls is all about, as it seems to be a very strange town where very strange things happen. And in fact, it seems that this is completely normal for the town's residents. And something quite curious is that, despite Uncle Stan also seeming to ignore all these crazy events, his shack is full of very strange items. It almost looks like a museum. But the few times he has interacted with some of these creatures, it seems like it's something completely normal to him. Also, remember that it was because of them that Dipper ended up finding the mysterious journal number 3. This journal makes it very clear to Dipper that he shouldn't trust anyone. But why wouldn't he trust his twin sister, right? So Dipper tells Mabel about the journal, and they end up joining forces to solve all the strange events happening in the town. This journal was the first mystery introduced in the series, because with the number 3 on its cover, it's impossible not to wonder if there's a journal number 1 and journal number 2. To answer this, we know that the main villain the kids face is Gideon, a very powerful child, not just because he has a lot of money, but also because he seems to have some sort of telepathy and enchanted objects. His main goal is to get rid of the Mystery Shack, where Mabel and Dipper live. Well, you see friends, even though a lot of crazy things happen in this town, they all have a reason behind them. And Gideon having all this power can only mean one thing, that he also has a journal. And indeed, he's the owner of journal number 2, and being as greedy as he is, he tries to get his hands on Dipper's journal at all costs. He tried to win over Mabel, and for this reason, he wants to destroy the shack, thinking that the journal is hidden there. This kid isn't even afraid of death, and he even resorts to summoning a mysterious entity to get the code for the safe in the Mystery Shack. This entity has a very curious design. It's a triangle with a single eye, and seems to know everything. Plus, it knows a lot about the town and its residents, and this entity is Bill Cipher. The greedy Gideon ends up making a deal with Bill Cipher to open the safe, but unfortunately for him, Mabel and Zeus overheard his entire plan, so they quickly go to Dipper and tell him everything. With the help of journal number 3, they perform a ritual to enter Stan's mind and save the Mystery Shack. Inside Stan's mind, they confront Bill Cipher, but he reveals something very interesting, as he refers to these 3 characters as ? Shooting Star, and Pine Tree. And it's quite curious because these symbols appear in the illustrations of Bill Cipher, and this is where we start wondering, who do the other symbols represent? As things progress, they finally end up fighting Bill Cipher and defeat him with all the knowledge they've gained. It seems that Uncle Stan had been preparing Dipper for anything since he was a child, but when they finally manage to defeat Bill Cipher, he tells them that there's a much greater threat and that he'll be watching them in case he ever needs them. When the kids finally leave Stan's mind, they start celebrating, but they didn't count on Gideon showing up and taking over the shack. This is just the beginning, as we see how Gideon builds a giant robot and even a park with his face on it. Uncle Stan gives up, and Dipper and Mabel set out to reclaim the Mystery Shack, so they turn to the journal to attack Gideon and take back the shack. But unfortunately, this attempt fails, and he even takes journal number 3 from them. After this, the siblings also give up and decide to go back home. And it seems like that's where the story would end. But Gideon realizes that the journal he took from Dipper is journal number 3, and he thought that there were only 2 journals. So out of greed, he catches up with the siblings with his giant robot and brings them back to town, thinking that they still have journal number 1. But when he realizes that Dipper doesn't have this journal, he throws him away and takes Mabel instead. But in a moment of bravery, Dipper decides to rescue his sister and leaps into the abyss. This is very interesting, as no one thought Dipper would mature so much, but all the training with weird creatures, fighting a cosmic entity, falling into the endless abyss, and defeating gnomes is not easy at all. So it all helped him develop his character and be able to save his sister's life when she was in danger. This season ends with Gideon being arrested for spying on people. Now let's talk about the second season. It's worth mentioning that this second installment is a bit different from the first season, because for starters, the most relevant mysteries we'll have are who the authors of these mysterious journals are. In fact, in this season, several things from season 1 start to make sense, including Stan's time machine. This first episode begins with Dipper calling the police and reviving the zombies, and this start is quite curious, because it was in the first episode of the first season when they mentioned the zombies, and it's because of this episode that Dipper ends up discovering hidden messages in the journal, which can only be seen with ultraviolet light. One of these hidden messages reveals a secret bunker, where Dipper finds journal number 1. Inside this bunker, Dipper ends up encountering a shape-shifting creature that shows him the face he'll make on the day he dies. And it's quite chilling, because it's the same face Dipper makes in one of the scariest episodes of the season. In fact, this season is where we see more involvement of other characters, like Sue's parents or Wendy, whom Dipper spends most of his time crushing on. It's here that Wendy shows more character development, demonstrating her maturity and bravery by helping the kids defeat horrible creatures. It's also in this season where we learn a bit more about the character Pacifica, a girl who was very egocentric because she came from a wealthy family, but it's in the episode Gulf War and Northwest Mansion Mystery where we learn more about her life and why she's the way she is. Because being the daughter of a wealthy family, her parents were always putting pressure on her, which is why she had to be number 1 at everything. But before we move forward with the explanation, we need to talk about 2 specific episodes. It's in these 2 episodes that Uncle Stan becomes one of the most important characters in the story. Thanks to finally getting his time machine to work, strange things start happening in the town, and the police take notice, leading to the shack being shut down and Uncle Stan being separated from the siblings, as he's accused of stealing chemicals from a nuclear plant. But Mabel and Dipper decide to clear the uncle's name and escape to return to the shack and watch Stan's recording. The kids are shocked to discover that Stan did indeed steal these chemicals. And things get even more mysterious when they find a box full of documents with fake IDs. And guess what? All these fake IDs belong to Stan. The darkest part is that they didn't just find those IDs, but also documents indicating that Stan had been lying about his name and his past. So the kids ask themselves, who has been taking care of us all this time? It's at this moment when the phrase "trust no one" starts to make a lot of sense. Continuing with the episode, the kids find Stan's machine and end up running, and Dipper orders Mabel to disconnect it. However, she decides to trust her heart because Stan tells them not to, as she has spent most of his life working on that machine. Thanks to Mabel trusting her uncle, one of the biggest mysteries of the series is revealed. This machine was necessary because Stan wanted to bring someone else into this dimension, and it was his other brother, who is actually the author of the journals. Everything we see in this season is truly amazing. Discovering who the real author of the journal is, the story of the Stan brothers, Dieper discovering that his uncle has all the journals, and Bill controlling Dieper's body are really memorable moments. Remember when I said at the beginning that it seemed like all the residents were unaware of how strange this town is? In one of the episodes, we revealed a few important details. The first explains this aspect of the inhabitants. There's an elite group called the Society of the Blind Eye, whose main purpose is to make life more peaceful for all the residents by erasing the traumas and memories they have of all the creatures they've encountered. The founder of the society is also the creator of the memory erasing machine. But after using this machine on himself for a long time, he lost all his memories and couldn't even remember who he was. By the way, this character was a close friend of the journal's author. Stanford ends up entering Dieper's and Mabel's lives after traveling through several dimensions, but this only causes a permanent crack in the gateway that allows Bill Cipher to enter reality. This is very important to the story, as Bill Cipher did everything he could to return to reality and unleash chaos. But for all of this to happen, Bill made a deal with a key character named Blandin, who previously worked with the Society of the Blind Eye, but ended up being fired because of Mabel and Dieper. In fact, Blandin manages to deceive Mabel, convincing her to keep an endless summer in order to open the bridge that connected Bill Cipher to the reality, marking the beginning of the end. And that's how Bill unleashes Weirdmageddon, causing destruction everywhere. Mabel was trapped in a prison of reality, while Dieper and Uncle Stan joined forces to try to defeat Cipher. However, he's too powerful and ends up destroying the 3 journals as if they were nothing, which were their only way to get rid of Bill Cipher. Unfortunately for them, they also have to face Gideon, as the Triangle brainwashed them to believing that Mabel was destined to be his girlfriend, so he should keep her locked up in the bubble prison. But Dieper manages to change his mind, telling him that you can't force someone to love you. Despite being so arrogant, Gideon ends up agreeing and doing the right thing, thus challenging Bill Cipher. When they manage to enter the bubble, they try to convince everyone to stay in that reality, as it shows you all the desires you yearn for, so that you won't want to leave. And in fact, this is why Mabel now doesn't want to leave that bubble, as she's living her perfect summer. But as always, Dieper helps her understand that to enjoy things, they must come to an end, and that if anything bad happens, he'll always be there to protect her. This is how they manage to rescue Mabel, and the moment to hunt Bill Cipher arrives. It's then that they meet up with Uncle Stanford and reveal other characters. And now that they are all together, decide to create a machine to defeat Bill Cipher. After a completely epic battle, they manage to save the entire town from Bill Cipher, and they show us this table of full symbols that we had seen before associated with Bill Cipher. Now everything makes sense, because we finally see that these symbols represent each of the characters. But to accomplish all of this, a sacrifice had to be made. The time came when Stan proved he wanted to do something for his family, and they had to erase his memory to restore everything to normal. This is where the second season ends, with Dieper and Mabel being completely different characters from when they started, more mature and filled with a wealth of knowledge and experiences. And it's for all these reasons that Gravity Falls ends up being one of the best Disney series. It always kept the mystery and details in place so that the entire story made perfect sense, and of course, was full of intrigue. Leave a comment below on why you think Gravity Falls is an excellent series.